After the awarding ceremony, the two went to a cafe. They were sitting on a table. Youngman was slouching while the master was sitting elegantly, talking about the differences, In addition, each of them had a drink in front. In the middle was a rock. His master began the conversation. The fact that Youngman entered the tournament because of a rock and the fact that he is skilled in the production of potions continued to amaze him. So, he asked Youngman where did he learn alchemy. The response that Youngman gave was that he had studied on his own and that the reason he participated in the competition was that he really needed this rock. Master Bam-joon put on a little smile. This kid never fails to surprise him every single time. Then, he asked Youngman if he had joined a building before becoming my disciple. Youngman answered no. The master dismissed the idea and asked him about the rock instead. He asked Youngman about the motivation behind his participation in the competition for the rock. Youngman responded that it may not look like it, but it is a precious ore. Youngman's eyes sparkled with delight as the thought came into his mind. So I've been meaning to ask you, by any chance, do you know of any forger? Youngman took the opportunity to ask. He wanted a forger with a naked hire craftsman. Because of what he had just heard, the master referred to him as a brat. It is impossible for a craftsman to smelt that chunk of rock in order to create something from it. However, Youngman continues to maintain his claim, stating that the object in question was more than just a rock. In addition to this, he made the suggestion that the master would confirm it with the adventurer's eye. After turning into a brat, Youngman has transitioned into a punk. The words that the young man had spoken made Master Bam-joon want to chuckle. He is at a loss for words because he cannot believe that he asked him to use his unique skill for something that is so trivial and foolish. Despite the new nicknames he has gained, Youngman does not want to allow himself to be defeated. He entwined his hands and smiled endearingly at the master, pleading with him to have a look at it, even for a moment. Just one try, and he will not bother him with this again. Master Bam-joon, on the other hand, was still against the idea, because no matter how he looks at it, it's just a rock to him. However, he could not face the thought of his student going home disappointed, so he went ahead and did it. Also, even though Youngman wants to try it just for once, he would not stop bothering him for sure. Adventurer's Eye is trying to look into the ore's information, altering the revealed information regarding the ore. Adventurer's Eye has confirmed the altered information. Youngman was sitting still as he watched his master perform the procedure. After some time had passed, the information regarding the mineral was revealed. It was an ore of the soul grade that could be utilized for amplifying mana, storage, and sublimation. Additionally, it has the ability to conceal its owner, and those who are not qualified to possess it are unable to do so. Master Bam-joon raised and curved his brows, thus wrinkles become visible across his face. His eyes widened and his mouth widened. Even the people in charge of organizing the competition were under the impression that it was an unidentified mineral. How did Youngman find out about it and decide to enter the competition? The master's eye drew an empty stare. If it was up to him, he'd like to pry on Youngman. On the other hand, Youngman was sitting still in his chair. His face was plastered with an anxious grin the entire time. He is pondering the reason for his master's silence at this moment. Master Bam-joon has made the decision to put all of his thoughts aside for the meantime. But for the time being, he will have to watch over him. How much will that brat grow? You want the help of a craftsman, right? Teacher Bam-joon asked. And because of this, Youngman had a smile that reached his eyes. He looks like a kid who has just received his birthday gift. The master heaves a sigh as he remembers something. Before he left, he reminded his student that he needed to take a break. But the student ended up picking up this item instead. He joined the competition to get the ore. That's not resting, I guess. The master told him that, rather than participating in the contest, he should have traveled or met with his friends or done something else of the sort. Youngman was puzzled. Friends? Does he have any? When Master Bam-joon stood up from his seat, Youngman immediately followed his action and did the same thing. His master told him that he would give him a heck of special training soon. The master then left. Youngman was left alone. As he observes the back of Master Bam-joon leaving, he is reminded of the question that he had brought up to him a while ago. Friends? It had been some time since he last made contact with them. He pondered whether or not he deserved to make touch with them at all. For the past 2 years, he hasn't been in touch with his one and only friend from the academy. That made him look at his phone. Should he contact the person? He was startled when his phone suddenly lit up while he was in the middle of his thoughts. A ringtone was heard from his place. It was a call from Teeman. Youngman is displaying signs of panic. The question that came to Youngman's mind was, why is he suddenly contacting me like this? It is very clear that he is at a loss for what to do. But if there is one thing that is certain, he told himself that he was still not ready. As he contemplated what action he ought to take, the tone from the ringtone continued to play in the background. Should he or shouldn't he answer the call? He can't hang up, either. At the same time, a person was walking past him. The same sound can be heard on his phone. Youngman noticed it, so he took a glance. Both of their mouths fell open onto the floor when they saw each other and recognized their faces. A little while later, still in the same cafe, it was called Pork Belly Cafe. By the way, Youngman was seen sitting on a stool, but this time, he was with someone. It was the guy from the rooftop. During the conversation, they were exchanging friendly smiles with one another. It is obvious that they have not seen one another in a very long time because, indeed, it has been a very long time since they did so. Kang Taemin was the name of the young man. It is likely that he is either the best or the second best student in the academy. Since they started attending the academy, he has demonstrated a great deal of talent in each of the classes that they have taken. A man who possesses a wide range of skills. Swordsmanship is one of his many skills, and he excels above the others. And with that talent, you'll be able to take on a class dungeon with ease. Taemin was grilling some pork belly. He told Youngman that it was his treat, by the way, so they must be having some samgyeopsal at the moment. Soju can also be seen on the table. Taemin crossed his arms in front of his chest as he smiled widely at Youngman. He told him that the group chat had erupted into chaos ever since he informed them that he was with him. They are so filled with envy, but Youngman thinks otherwise. He faked a laugh and said that there was nothing to be jealous about. Then, Taemin suddenly recalled an important detail. Yuna will join them in the cafe. He claims that after she saw the message from their group chat, she immediately responded that she would come to the location. Youngman was taken aback by what he heard, because he was completely unprepared for that. He asked Taemin in a puzzled tone if she was on her way right at this moment. Taemin responded by saying that Yuna had indicated that she was somewhere near the location, so yes. As Youngman continued to think about it, he fell into reflective silence. He was taken aback by how quickly he will see them. He is certain that Yuna must be mad in some way. The poor boy must be afraid. He started thinking about the fun times they had together in the past. Because of Yuna, he was able to persevere through the challenging life that he experienced inside the academy. Taemin was able to interrupt his train of thought. After they had lost contact with him, he shared with Youngman that it had been difficult for Yuna, so he must tell her how he has been doing until now. When he received a notification on his phone, Taemin's mouth contorted into the shape of an oval. Yuna is close to arriving when suddenly, a very dark aura surfaces. Author of the story is detecting the movement of Everton, the devil worshipper. Youngman froze in his seat. The hologram indicates that the curse needs to be lifted in some way. The subjects of the curses cast by the Everton Association are in need of Youngman's assistance. As a reward for his cooperation, he will receive information that pertains to them in exchange. As soon as the gravity of the situation hits him, Youngman immediately begins searching his surrounding area. He is well aware of the indications of bad omens that dominate the area. But something is odd. It was a bad omen, but he did not feel any murderous intentions. On the other side, the Taemin of a while ago, who was always smiling and laughing, was no longer there. His brows were knitted together, and his lips were a bit parted. Seriousness covered his entire being. He called Youngman's attention. He was about to tell him about the bad aura, but Youngman responded immediately that he could feel it as well. The author of the story has found out that the man in the vicinity has twisted. Youngman suddenly became aware that the man was familiar with him, and it is going their way. They both stood up from where they had been sitting and looked in the same direction. Blue shoes came into view. As they waited for the individual to reveal their identity, there was a deafening hush among them. The sound of his footsteps becomes more audible as he approaches them and draws closer. "It's been a while," the person said. "It's not a he, it's a she." She revealed her face and called Youngman's name. Both of the guys were surprised. They stood unblinking. It was their friend, Yuna. She was giddy with excitement as she smiled and waved her hands in an adorable manner at the two young men. However, neither of them had fully recovered from their surprise. They can't take off their mind that Yuna is cursed. In a flashback, the massive school was seen in the distance. As Youngman made his way down the stairs, he was carrying a variety of school kinds of stuff with him. He had just reached the top of the last flight of stairs when he came to a stop. He overheard a few of the men chatting about him amongst themselves. One person asked as to whether or not it was true that he had obtained the top spot in the entrance exams. Another person answered in the affirmative, but he afterward let it be known that he did not possess any abilities. However, Youngman continued to deliver his post-admission introductory speech, and he ought to be embarrassed by the actions he had taken. He should be ashamed. He carried on as if nothing had happened and continued his walk. However, he does run across one individual. Because the man was unhappy with what he had done and claimed that he had hit him, he purposefully caused Youngman to fall by extending his foot and causing him to trip. Fear appeared on Youngman's face, and his eyes expanded in response. However, as was to be expected, he ended up falling down the stairs. The group of guys mocked him as his face fell flat on the floor when someone came into the scene. There was a woman's voice that could be heard in the room. The young lady demanded that they should immediately offer their apologies to Youngman right at that very moment. Youngman was taken aback. He had not anticipated that anyone would do something like that for him. He is currently observing the young lady as she continues her speech while seated on the floor. She warned them that they had best keep their mouths shut if they were going to act like cowards and talk behind someone else's back. In contrast to garbage like them, Han Youngman is working hard in his studies. The guy from earlier was so mad at what the young lady called them. He was about to unleash his inner demons when the two guys stopped him. Unfortunately, the young lady she was screaming at was Ki Yuna, the daughter of the Heavenly Mansion Guild's director. But it seems like this guy went nuts. He told the other that he didn't care and he was not afraid. But Yuna just smiled sweetly at them. But she raised her middle finger though. Youngman stared at her hands and was speechless at what she had done. Well, same Youngman, same. The other two dragged their friend away from the scene. When Yuna placed her hand on his chest, Youngman's brows furrowed, and he gave her a curious look. In addition to that, she inquired as to whether or not he was alright. Youngman hesitantly took her hand when Yuna asked Youngman for a second time if he had eaten yet because she had a bet with Teeman for a meal, and she won. Yuna smiled widely and said, "Let's ask Teeman to buy us a meal." During those hard times in the academy, Yuna became Youngman's first friend. Both Kang Teeman and Ki Yuna were well known throughout the multiple departments of the academy. Despite this, Youngman continued to be bullied because the top ranker and the second top ranker of the practical examination were seen hanging out with him with a failure like him. Even though it was against the rules to fight in class, the two of them did it nonetheless in the form of regular exams and sparring sessions so that others would stop harassing him. And that is why he felt grateful and, at the same time, sorry for them. Bringing things back into the here and now, both of the men maintained an extreme silence. Yuna was the only one who did the conversation. She had the impression that something was wrong due to their lack of interaction. Teeman spoke. He observed that Yuna does not appear to be in very good shape. When he had seen her most recently, she was not like that. Yuna responded swiftly to his comment by dismissing it by waving her hand in the air. She told him that she was fine, and the attending physician confirmed that there was nothing wrong with her. As a result of Youngman's agreement with Teeman, the latter was questioned about whether or not anything significant had occurred to her recently, such as whether or not she had traveled or had been somewhere. Yuna wandered aimlessly through her thoughts. In point of fact, as she explained it, the academy was getting ready for a dungeon tour, and she went there to conduct a preliminary inspection. Since this was just a preliminary inspection of the entrance to the dungeon, the professors accompanied them on their journey. As she entered, she had the idea that this dungeon did not appear to be a newly constructed one. Rather, it seemed to her that it was just like an ordinary one when she noticed something odd in front of her. A reddish tint was introduced to the scene in one of the boulders. She went in that way to satisfy her insatiable need for information and made an attempt to touch it. The blood stain sprang to life when she touched it. There was a force that pulled her away from it. Her body flew a few meters away from the rock. She looked at the blood spot while holding her hand. She questioned her sanity by inquiring to herself, was that an illusion? At that moment, the blood stain has also disappeared. She was startled when someone called her, telling her that they were almost done, so it was time to go. So she left the place. The two boys were paying close attention to her as she spoke. Teeman is having trouble accepting the fact that something terrible has occurred to her. Yuna said that there are dungeons that have some kind of illusion trap at the entrance, and since she had seen those before, she assumed that this was one of them. On the other hand, Teeman is totally against it. Her mana is in such a twisted state that she believes it to be an illusion and lets it go unchecked. To consider it as a mere illusion is foolishness. Yuna faked a laugh and tried to joke around Teeman about how scary his statement is when Youngman caught her attention. Deep concern was plastered on his face. His eyes appeared to be attentive, and the space between his brows was almost completely filled. He stated that Teeman was correct. They can't just leave the situation like that. Yuna might be in danger, so he offered to take a look. However, Yuna rejected it straight away. She expressed regret for the fact that this was the first time they would see each other again after a number of years, and the first thing she did was to cause him concern. But Youngman did not let her, and he said it was just fine, and she just needed to stay still for a second. When Teeman and Yuna witnessed what Youngman was doing, their lips dropped to the ground, and they were shocked. He was concentrating so hard on what he was doing that he closed his eyes and drew a tiny line with his lips. A golden light appeared to be emanating from all directions around the young man. Teeman even questioned himself, what's with his mana? He asked, is it the healing light he was seeing? Since the Everton organization is a demon-worshipping group, they can also curse by borrowing the power of the demon. Your mana has been temporarily converted into divine power. Hero's mana is strengthening divine power. You have successfully immersed yourself with Lesser Priestess Esther. The priestess blesses you. After a brief period of time, Youngman was able to successfully finish the immersion. It is his only option to strike back using the divine power at his disposal. To our good fortune, the curse is not especially strong despite the fact that she is merely a lesser priestess, which ought to be sufficient. Then, he informed Yuna that he would now get started. Yuna nodded in agreement. He brought both of his hands together in front of him as the yellow light began to emanate, and he redirected the light of the evil away from Yuna's body with them. Yuna was completely taken aback when he watched her companion drive the oppressive energy away until it disappeared. She stared with her eyes wide open. Teeman slouched forward and placed both palms on the table before turning to Youngman and demanding an explanation. As a result of Teeman's sudden action, Youngman was shocked and jumped out of his head. Yuna, on the other hand, had both of her hands on her cheeks and a joyful expression on her face as she thought about what had just taken place and also asked how Youngman did it. He broke into a smile. He expressed regret and said that although Yuna helped him each and every day, all he could do was something like that. But Yuna dismissed it. Additionally, she got up from his seat. Now, both Teeman and her were standing in front of Youngman, appearing to be very pleased with him. Teeman asked him to confirm if it was really a healing power he had performed just now. The response that Youngman provided was that it is never the same and that he was unsure of what to even label it. After that, Teeman completely disregarded his query and seized Youngman firmly in both of his arms. Because of the excruciating suffering, Youngman's soul was close to departing his body. Teeman confirmed to him that he had, in fact, become awake, and he extended his congratulations to him. Teeman, that is such a wonderful and kind way to congratulate someone. Bravo. On the other side, the event left an unforgettable time for Yuna. She was deeply touched that finally, Youngman was able to do it. She wrinkled her brows and made a valiant effort to fight back the tears that were beginning to well up at the outer edges of her eyes. Yuna rummaged through her bag in an effort to look for a piece of paper for Youngman to sign on. Teeman was inquiring about the celebration that will take place following graduation. It was his suggestion that they should write out a slave contract. He also asked him when he would go back to school. In an effort to settle the two of them down, Youngman scratched the back of his head and waved his hand in front of him. Then he added that he is going to drop out of the school because he already has a master and hence would need to undergo specialized training instead of continuing his education there. Youngman was startled when both of them spoke loudly. Both Teeman and Yuna felt let down by the situation. To tell you the truth, Yuna's facial expression makes it appear as though she is about to break down and cry. They both questioned Youngman at the same time about the name of his master. Youngman faked a laugh. He is pressured by the two, but he is aware that he cannot expose the fact that Master Bamjoon is his master, so he informs them that he will do it at some point in the future. He expressed regret that he hadn't been able to stay in touch with them but reassured them that they each held a special place in his heart. Yuna put on a happy face and reassured Youngman that everything was just perfectly fine. The fact that he is in good health is the most important thing for her. Teeman acknowledged that they have not communicated with one another in quite some time. It came as such a shock to believe that he had just revealed something shocking to them out of the blue. He told Youngman that he'd call them every now and then to check on each other. Youngman agreed. He was just really grateful that he saw his friends. The day came to a speedy close. After everything that had taken place earlier in the day, Youngman was beyond exhausted. On the chilly floor, he was discovered lying face down, holding on to his teddy bear. He recalled the good memories he had earlier. The three of them spend the whole day together to have fun. They eat and drink beer. They sang karaoke, played claw machines. Even though he was exhausted, he had no regrets about the good time he had with his friends. It has been a very long time since he last played with that much intensity. Without a doubt, he was allowing his inner kid to take control of his body earlier. What a great time he had. You have satisfied the episode's requirements. A reward is being given. When he recalled the quest from earlier, he raised his head from the floor as he thought about it. As a reward for lifting the spell that had been placed on Yuna, he will receive information regarding Everton. The hologram told him to check the reward, so he did. Upon reading, his eyes grew in shock. Raid, Academy Dungeon Field Trip. It was the same field trip Yuna was talking about earlier. The place where she got the curse. Rage flows through his veins like lava. He only has 15 days left until the Everton's devotees launch their raid. Horror crossed his face. Those evil people will be in the academy, so that means Yuna and Timon will be in danger. When he was ready to phone the professors in the academy, he suddenly had the realization that it was possible that doing so would not be the most sensible thing to do. In the event that this strategy is unsuccessful, those Everton devotees might find out about it, and as a result, they may change the attack route. So he closed his eyes and took deep breaths to calm himself down. Nothing good will come out if he lets himself panic. He might put Yuna and Timon in danger more. After considering the many courses of action that he could take, he came to the realization that all he needed to do was stop Everton first. Considering that he created the organization in the first place, this may work to his benefit. His eyes took on a look of unwavering determination. He has to take care of this thing no matter what. He made a vow to himself that he would never, ever allow other people to suffer because of him, especially Yuna and Timon. He told himself that he could not keep receiving help from them, so he was going to win this battle in 15 days. After a few hours had passed, various pieces of exercise equipment, an armory, and basically a big space were brought into the scene. At that moment, Youngman were in a place where he could get a bird's eye view of the entire area. He can't help himself but speak of how gorgeous the palace is. It appeared as though Master Bam-joon was becoming increasingly irritated by how loud his student was becoming. He was on the verge of having his eardrums rupture as a result of Youngman's incessant chatter. This breathtaking location is going to be Youngman's training chamber, or, much worse, the site where he will die if he is unable to keep up with the training that the master is giving him. But despite this, Youngman could not help but get excited about what he was seeing. He inquired as to whether or not it was possible to set up such a state-of-the-art training room in the basement of a house. It looks like a large underground world. He claims that it is even more impressive than the gymnasium at the academy. But seriously, Youngman is really freaking out. His mouth might be ripped off by his constant tattering. Well, guess what? He's not yet done. He pointed out his fingers when he saw something from a distance. It was the 5th generation virtual combat system. He couldn't believe that his training room was the only place in Korea to have one of those, especially because it was for his personal use. Master Bam-joon had had enough of him for a long time. He answered by acting as if he were plucking his ears and stating that the amount was only 50 billion won, so he could not understand why anyone would make such a big deal about it. But 50 billion won was a big deal for Youngman. His mouth fell open at the realization of how costly it was. Master Bam-joon walked towards Youngman with both his hands on the pockets of his cloak. And he said, although I'm not a businessman, I still need to get my investment back. Youngman did not quite get it, so he asked him to repeat it. The master responded with a question. You have made up your mind, right? He plastered a smile on his face and told Youngman that there was no need to feel too burdensome. He just needed to work hard like he always had as he smacked Youngman's back. That must be personal. Poor Youngman. Master Bam-joon suddenly remembered something. On top of an adjacent wooden table was something that looked like a white box. It was taken by the master, who then handed it to Youngman. It was the thing he told him about last time. Youngman took out the covering. The original author of the story is appraising Bastium. It was the quote-unquote of the rock that he won from the contest. It became refined into a beautiful necklace and is now called refined Bastium. It was easier for Youngman to appreciate the necklace's elegance when he removed it from its packaging and positioned it so that it was directly in front of his face. Whoever made it must have had a lot of talent on the job because it was made with such careful attention to detail. The teacher began to describe the difficulties he had encountered while dealing with that item as the student was putting the necklace around his neck to try it out. He stated that all of the forgers made a tremendous amount of commotion in the location where he fetched it. They went so far as to plead with him to sell it to them. A winning smile spread across Youngman's face. He stated that there was no way that he would ever give it to another person, and since he was already the owner of the mineral, so he would cling to it for the rest of his life. Because they are about to begin the first class, it is necessary for Youngman to immediately put an end to all of his goofiness. The instructor advised him to go into the training room and work on getting his body warmed up there first. Right away, Youngman did what he was told. He was curious as to what he would teach him first, given that the master was the one who established the alchemy's teachings. Would it be real swordsmanship, or how to handle mana? Can it be spearmanship because the master told him from the past that he knows it and other special training techniques as well? Or is it magic? Youngman was daydreaming about the possible choices when it was announced that the door was closed. The air circulation inside the training room is suspended. He was more surprised at how advanced that room was when a sudden appearance of light on the floor caught his eye. Meanwhile, Master Bam-joon was sitting on a chair watching Youngman. He stated that, in point of fact, he had given a great deal of thought and consideration to the question of what he had to educate Youngman first. It is most likely that he learned all of the theories while he was in the academy. Therefore that would be pointless. What an adventurer needs are real experiences. That is why the mana in the air has been forcibly contaminated. The hero's mana has become extremely sensitive. As Youngman's environment started to shift, he stared blankly ahead with his mouth wide open. The atmosphere is being permeated by the contaminated mana. A green sticky energy is trying to overwhelm you. It begins from his foot and continues all the way up to his thigh. The green energy has the appearance of a sticky slime that has been sitting about for years past its expiration date. As a result of it, Youngman landed on the ground face first. His eyebrows began to move in the direction of touching each other. As he struggled to regain control of his body, he began to show signs of sweat forming on his face. He tried to wash away the pain by clenching his jaw and baring his teeth. In that situation, he appears to be completely helpless. It seemed as if he was trapped in a swamp and unable to move at all. His eyes widened when he realized something. How is the air inside the dungeon? The figure of Master Bam-Jun could be seen seated in front of a number of monitors and holograms. He was watching his student go through a lot of despair. He claimed that even if it's virtual reality, it's difficult to even stand up. That's how hard the first training was. However, before Youngman can enter a dungeon, he must adapt himself to the polluted environment outside. Thus he must try holding on and getting used to it. A small smirk formed on the master's face as he muttered these words, "Show me what you're hiding." In the meantime, Youngman was still lying on the floor, but the distress he was feeling a while ago was nothing compared to what he was feeling at this very moment. He was in such much anguish that a normal person would have passed away by now. As he fought for breath, his mouth was wide open, and he was gasping for air. He is unable to breathe normally because it feels as though 1,000 elephants are sitting on his chest, squeezing it as if it were made of paper. He made a ball with his fist and clenched it. It is important that he pull himself together. He cannot simply give in and allow this thing to win over him. He still has a lot of training to complete. It is necessary for him to finish this. After taking a few long, deep breaths, he then makes an effort to keep an even pace with his inhalations and exhalations throughout the whole thing. However, he barely managed to keep his breathing even. His entire body was trembling as if it were crying out for oxygen to drink. But still, his breathing has improved. That's why Master Bam-Jun was in awe. He did not think Youngman could do it quicker. Despite this, this is just the beginning of everything. The dungeon exhibits an entirely different ecosystem in comparison to that of the real world. Additionally, he should be aware of the fact that the environment is extremely suitable for monsters. It is their home, in fact. The air that is contained within the dungeon is not made just like that. If someone were to pass away while exploring the dungeon, their remains would vanish, leaving behind just grudges. The energy of that grudge will infect the dungeon. And a dungeon that has been tainted in this way has the potential to stab someone in the organs or even cause death. Therefore, Master Bam-Jun had the assumption that Youngman would not have the luxury of concealing his unique ability. He would have no choice but to use it in some way. On the other hand, while the master was sitting back and relaxing in his seat, Youngman was still struggling to catch his breath. Because he was grasping his chest, we can see that he is really having a lot of trouble breathing right now. 55 minutes had passed since he was initially exposed to the pollution. As the pollution becomes more severe, his body is forced to adapt by putting constraints on its ability to move around. Youngman was able to get himself into a sitting position similar to that of an Indian. Because the tower had an auto-purification system, he had never before been exposed to any kind of contamination. He thought that this level of difficulty was not something he could withstand. With just persistence, he has to do something. The hero's mana is protecting mana organs from contaminated energy. He would have been in big trouble had it not been for the hero's mana. The hero's mana is growing on its own through continuous purification. Youngman looked at his hands. He is slowly reaching his limit, so he called his master. According to Master Bam-Jun, 57 minutes is a lot to hold out for. It is pretty impressive staying that long inside without using his abilities, as he thought. He permitted Youngman to get out of the place. In the end, he could not uncover Youngman's secret. The response that Youngman gave to his teacher, however, is extremely surprising. It's not that he wanted to get out. It's just he wanted to use his unique ability. Because he was unable to maintain his hold for much longer, it's possible that he'll be declared dead at any moment from now on. The brows of Master Bam-Jun were furrowed in frustration. He appeared to be enraged by what he had just been told. Get ready for a scolding, Youngman. The color vanished from Youngman's face as if it had never been there. In his defense, he thought that he should not use it. However, the master had a different take on the meaning. He asserted that he purposely did not use it and held on for 1 hour. Youngman, despite the despair he was feeling, faked a laugh as he tried to escape his master's wrath. He could use his unique ability, after all. If he had just used it from the start, he would not have had to suffer that much. He would not be scolded on his first level of training. "You should have told me I could use them from the beginning," Youngman said as he tried to put on a laugh. The master was so angry that he stroked his nape with his palm as if doing so would bring his blood pressure back down to a normal level. He yelled at Youngman that the dungeon was not a joke and with lots of curses. Youngman was getting scolded, but Eden had the nerve to laugh at him. However, he admitted to Youngman that he was doing a good job of holding on. If it were not for him, he would not have been able to keep going for even a single minute. Indeed, the hero's mana is on a different level. The corner of Youngman's mouth turned upward, creating the appearance of a grin on his face. Indeed, Eden was correct. There are other things besides so-called divine energy that are capable of fighting against the devil. The extremely pure kind of energy that can only be accessed by the 7 heroes. This is referred to as the hero's mana. Using that, it was definitely easy to hold on with the contamination.